Many doubted we'd ever see it, but here it is. The return to glory.
McDavid stops up. What a move. Shoots. Scores!
Welcome to The Outsiders, brought to you by the Macintosh Group at RE/MAX River City. This is podcast number 32. I'm Bryn Griffiths along with Robin Brownlee. How you doing today?
I'm terrific, and I've got to say, Bryn, because we've been working remotely the last little while, since we got back at it, actually, we are at the Bryn Griffiths home studio, and it's rather impressive. And what are all the pictures of that old guy on the wall over there?
Funny, you know, I had a conversation once with a friend of ours, Terry Jones, and we were talking about media accreditation. I had boxes of them. I mean, I know you've got boxes of them, but one of the things that he mentioned to me was putting them into shadow boxes or frames so that you could see the body of your work, right? And so that you would be able to. So anyway, I've gone and done that. I took about maybe a third of all my media accreditations, and I put them together and put them in a frame. And, you know, they've all got stories attached to them. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of fun. Like, I've got a couple of Super Bowl accreditations of the three that I've attended. You know, when I worked for the Oilers, I still have a couple of the accreditations from drafts that I went to. Media passes from Grey Cups. I've got a couple up there. Stanley Cup championships, Eskimo and Calgary Stampeder accreditations when I was working in Edmonton and Calgary. A couple of pictures of me holding the Stanley Cup. One on an aircraft with Adam Graves, for goodness sakes. That goes back to 1990. And some newspaper clippings from when I worked in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, covering the Moose Jaw Warriors, doing play-by-play. So I'm happy with that. It's, you know, it looks like the kind of thing my dad would have done years and years and years ago. Mm-hmm. But everything's got a story for me. Oh, the other one that I'm very pleased about is I have my ticket, because when I worked for the Oilers, I was given 2 season tickets. And I have my ticket and my all-access pass from the Wayne Gretzky Bannerman retirement night, which is still a real career highlight for me, but also is the most nervous I've ever been of anything I've ever done, because I knew the city was watching to make sure that we pulled this thing off properly, because the world would be watching how we retired Wayne Gretzky's banner. Right from Wayne coming out in a pickup truck that I still laugh about, right to Joey Moss with the Wayne Gretzky banner upside down.
Yes.
Which is still a great classic moment, and I still love it, and I still laugh every time I think about it. Anyway, so it's I'm happy I did it. I got the time to do it, so why wouldn't I?
Well, long past the time when your fears are alleviated or not, the Oilers pulled it off. They tend to do that with the pregame ceremonies. That's one thing. Great teams, bad teams, in between teams, they've always done those kind of things first class. And that Gretzky banner night was one for the memory banks.
Yeah, it certainly was. It was for me. And I slept like a baby that night. But I didn't get to bed till very late as well. Hey, a couple of things we're going to touch on. One, this is Masters Week, and I love watching the Masters in April. Here we are going to watch the Masters in November. No fans along the course. I don't think you're going to see the flower beds blooming like we do every April. It's going to have a different look about it. But joining us on the podcast today, longtime writer, hockey writer. He's done it all. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that he did exceptionally well was write about golf, and that's Cam Cole, a friend of ours, I'm happy to say. And he's going to join us to talk about his reflections of Augusta National and that whole experience, and a little bit of other golf stuff, too, while we're talking about it. But a couple of little things I want to talk about before we get going here. This past week, I felt completely lost because during the weekdays, now that the World Series is over, okay, so there's no NHL hockey, there's no NBA, there's no World Series. So Monday through Friday, I'm a little lost. I make it up with college football and the NFL on Saturday and Sunday, and maybe some other sports, but I'm struggling with live sports, not seeing enough of it when I want, not just on the weekend. Are you? And you know, it's great to have extra family time. I don't think it's not affecting you, is it?
Oh no, I mean we're we're happy as bugs in a rug at home through all this COVID stuff. But you know what? We're lucky, speaking of Cam, it's going to be different. But, the Masters has always signaled sort of the official arrival of spring for me.
Yeah.
Well, now it's the official arrival of November. It's going to be different, and it's got a limited run, but at least we've got that coming up. Hopefully we get to a point, where we can get some other sports up and running. It's going to take a while. We still have to wait on the National Hockey League. What are they going to do? We have to get,
Well, look at the NBA say they're going to start up on the 22nd of December.
Well, I tell you, I hope they can, because the thing that's put us in the situation we're in, not to harp on it, we got to get the COVID numbers under control, because I don't want to, I don't know what hockey's going to be like starting in January, if they in fact get it done then in terms of the NHL or the NBA now. But I'd like to see it happen, because if the numbers aren't right, we're not even going to be able to play limited season. So hopefully we straighten that out, and we're not looking for yet another Netflix series to watch.
One of the things you and I've been talking about off air, if we can still call it that on this podcast, is talking about getting to our guests a little quicker. And we can talk more at the back end. And that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to get to Cam Cole coming up here shortly. But we have to tell you, The Outsiders is brought to you by the Macintosh Group at Remax River City. 2020 has been a real interesting year for everybody. I don't think that that's a real shocker or a news bulletin. Certainly brought on some new challenges when it comes to selling homes in the Edmonton area and also right across the country. But the Macintosh Group at Remax River City, they rose to that challenge, and they're finishing the year rather successfully. They're really quite pleased with how the year has rolled out, considering how it started. We've just started a podcast. I'm working with Brent on a podcast called Just Sold with Brent McIntosh, which you can also download. And Brent's got some interesting little tidbits that you can catch. So all you have to do is go to your favorite ear candy sites, like obviously Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and the same way you get a hold of this podcast. And you can tune them in for sure. But if you're looking for a real professional group to help you sell or buy a home, then give Brent and his team a call. They'd love to hear from you. You could reach them, the Macintosh Group, at 780-464-0075, and the website is macintoshgroup.ca is the website, and they're looking for sellers, buyers, and they're also looking for a new agent. So if that is an area that, let's say you're out of work, but you have that skill set, give Brent a call. They would love to hear you over there. Okay, we got to do it the right way. Let's do this, shall we? And let's just ease in. Are you feeling relaxed, Robin? Are you okay over there?
I'm sleeping now.
Well, you don't have to be, because he's about to speak. The Masters. I love this week. This is a great week. I think I prefer it in April rather than November. But, for us, we're just watching it on TV. We don't have that opportunity to actually go. So we decided, let's talk to the one guy that we know has been there a lot, and that is Cam Cole, longtime writer. Hey, Cam, how you doing?
Good, Brent. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. It really is a special week just to watch it on television. But do you remember the first time that you went to Augusta National and what that was like?
I do remember, because I was down in Jacksonville for the end of spring training, and drove up through Georgia and South Carolina, and ended up kind of writing a travelogue piece about the journey up through all these backwoods places to get to this gleaming, sunshiny oasis in the middle of a bunch of strip malls and, not a very pretty town, but a very awesome golf course. And it was quite an experience walking up from the press center, just a few steps out to the edge of the number one fairway on a morning when not one spectator had yet set foot on the club, and just seeing how incredibly manicured everything was. It was like stepping into the Garden of Eden, I guess. It was just amazing. And I've never forgotten that. Every year that I went for 24 years after that, I would walk out of that press center, out through some, a cart path and some bushes, and then out onto the first fairway. And I had the same chills and the same feeling every year that I went back.
Now, Cam, was your first year 93, the year we flew into Florida and you did a little bit of spring training with the Marlins before going to Augusta?
Correct. Yeah, it was 93, and that was the year Bernard Longer won. And every year up until and including 2016, I went after that. So
that's a lot of. I tell you what, that's a lot of bucket list stuff there, Cam. You were obviously there for Mike Weir's win. You were there for Tiger's dominance of, what was it, 4 in 6 years or 7 years before he got this last one in 19. To ask you for highlights would take a long time, but when you think back to that, how about talk about the Weir thing just from the Canadian angle? That was huge back then, wasn't it?
Well, it was in the middle of Tiger's prime and Phil Mickelson's prime, and so from 91 to and including 96, only Tiger or Phil won the Masters 2001 to 2006, except the year that Mike Weir won. And so he won that thing in the middle of two great players' primes. And I think not a lot of people give him enough credit for what it took to do that for a guy that doesn't hit the ball a mile on a course that really rewards the long hitters. So it was a fantastic week, not a great weather week, kind of a really lousy weather week, as a matter of fact. And it was also the week that Martha Burke had her protest over the old men's club and all that. And so there was a lot to write about beside Mike's win. But Mike's win by itself was certainly one of the highlights of the 66 or so major golf championships that I got to cover. That was a great week.
Cam, that particular week, when did you start to think, hey, this Mike Weir story is not only developing, we might have a real winner here?
Well, Mike had already a good season at that point. He'd won a couple of tournaments, and he'd so he wasn't a total outsider. I don't think many people gave him a chance on a wet and soggy Augusta course to stick with the big hitters. But he started well, and he just kept making the putts. And I think Mike has always been one of those streaky putters where if he got the putter going, he was dangerous. And so I don't think even up to the last day, he was by any means a favorite, but he had to complete one round overnight sort of thing and clean it up the next morning. And then, so it was kind of a long slog to get the job done. But boy, he made every putt that he looked at coming down the stretch, including some real testers, including, I thought, the clutch putt of all time for him on 18 just to get into the playoff. And, I would say maybe Sunday morning, it looked like Mike had himself a chance to do this thing. Not until then.
It's interesting when you look at a guy like Weir, who, like you said, got his win when there were some other dominant players there. You go to a guy like Tiger, who's back in it this year, as is Mike Weir, all these years later. Tiger was more, obviously not telling you anything you don't know. He was the long guy. He was the athletic guy, totally different player. People always want to compare eras, and he's got the 5 green jackets now. But talk about those Tiger years, for lack of a better term. I'm trying to think of a more dominant golfer. I haven't seen one because Jack Nicklaus is a little too far back for even me, but has there been another stretch like that for anybody?
Oh, I think during Jack's prime years, it was a rare major when Jack wasn't a contender, and so Jack's prime probably lasted longer strictly because he never got himself into a jackpot like Tiger did in the middle of his career and had to come back from it. But I think Jack's record of wins and second places and third places in majors, if you go back over his timeline, is just astounding how many he was there or thereabouts to win. And so, yeah, I would say that the similarity between those two is that each was in his day, at least early in his day, much longer than almost anybody else. I mean, Jack was a big hitter at a time when, they were still using persimmon wooden clubs and Balata golf balls. So, the distances that you look at are not the same, but the margin that each player had over the others of his time was similar, and that's always been an advantage at Augusta. So Jack's won 6 and Tiger's won 5 and Phil's won 3, and some pretty big hitters there have done very well at Augusta.
Yeah, that's the thing. I guess in many cases, what you see, and you're a little bit older than me, not that much, but I just don't remember seeing Jack. The record book tells me everything I need to know, and I don't think Tiger pulls ahead in that greatest of all time argument because he's lost that time where it went off the rails for him, and I don't think he has enough time left to get it back, but those two dominant at the top in their eras. Is there anybody out there right now, Cam, whether we're talking, playing at Augusta coming up here or just in general, that has a chance to put together any kind of stretch even resembling what we saw to those two? I mean, I don't know. Does Dustin Johnson have any shot? Is there a name out there that has a chance that's young enough and good enough to be that good or almost?
Well, I mean, the key is young enough, right? For a while, it looked like Jordan Spieth was going to be that guy. He finished second in his first Masters in 2014, won it in 2015, finished second in 2016. It looked like he was going to be there every time he teed it up there because he just seemed to love the golf course and it loved him back. And then disaster struck and he hasn't been the same player since. So Augusta giveth and Augusta taketh away in terms of his career. I don't know that he's going to be able to resurrect things. The obvious names are guys like Bryson DeChambeau. If he is able to overpower this course, the new Bryson DeChambeau, the gorilla,
Yeah.
if he's able to overpower this course this year or next year and stays healthy, I don't know how the heck he's going to do it swinging as hard as he does, but if he manages to keep his body working and discovers the secret of unlocking Augusta, he's got the length to do whatever he wants to with that golf course or almost any other golf course. He would be the guy that stands out to me as young enough and strong enough and long enough to get it done. There's other guys that are really good players. Colin Morikawa, good young player. Koepka, who's not maybe young enough at this point to go on a run like Tiger had, but he seems to be immune to major championship nerves. He just goes out and plays and wins a lot. And so, there's a few guys, but I really do believe that Nicklaus was and Tiger was more than generational players. They were all-time players, and I just don't see anybody doing the kinds of things that they did. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe there's more guys down the road, but I don't think we're in that era yet.
You've seen him play up close, get a chance to watch him on television. What's happened to Rory?
I don't think Rory's head is 100% in it. I think Rory's Rory's such an interesting guy, and I love Rory. I think he's an honest, sort of unflinching about his own abilities and everybody else's. He won't duck a question. He'll give you an honest answer. I like the guy. I don't think he's 100% engaged in being the best that he can be. I don't think he's as driven as Tiger, who was in his day laser focused on every major to the point of, exclusion of everything else in his life. And I think Rory's just got too many other interests, and he's too engaging and too engaged in life to be that consistent. And so when things start going to heck for him in a round of golf, he kind of shrugs it off. He doesn't look like he's,
going to battle through it.
He's not a grinder per se, the way Tiger was. Tiger never gave up on a shot, whereas Rory will kind of shrug it off and say, "Oh, it's not my week."
We also watched a young Spaniard jumping up and down or running up and down fairways named Sergio Garcia, who is not participating this year. Is he getting to the end here? Because it just doesn't seem like he's quite got it.
Yeah, I mean, Sergio had only a couple of major challenges, not a couple, a handful. Hasn't been a great player in majors. Had a chance to win a couple of Open championships in Great Britain. But Sergio is another one of those guys that's kind of flaky, to put it in nice terms. Not
Okay.
super well-liked guy. Just has some quirks to his personality that he's a bit of a whiner. He was a guy who's always thought the fates were against, and he had to beat the whole world and the golf gods too. And it was just, his act got a little tired. So I don't know that he's got the mental makeup to be a long-term major championship guy.
Cam, it's interesting to me. I look through the field here, and there's the young guys who are going to contend, and then I see a name like, Mike Weir. I see Vijay Singh. I see some other older players. Now, these guys likely aren't going to challenge for anything, but when you watch them play, it's another one of those reminders of how quickly time goes by, isn't it?
Well, there is kind of an invisible line there for most players where they get to a certain age and something deserts them. They can't hold the putts anymore. They start to get the shakes over the 5-footers, or, they run into driving problems, or, there seems to be like a dividing line for most players where they just can't do the whole thing anymore and can't do it for 4 rounds. You'll see guys, because you win the Masters, that means you get to go until you're 65. And if you want to compete, unless they send you one of those suggesting letters that says you're not competitive anymore, you're cluttering up the field, why don't you sit this one out, which the Masters sometimes does to guys. But basically you're allowed to keep playing there. And so these guys go back every year because it's a wonderful experience, and it's a tribute to what they've done in their careers. But there are lots of guys in every Masters field that have no chance to win. And sadly, I would put Mike and VJ and some of those guys in that category. They've just reached an age where they can compete on the Champions Tour, but this is a great, big, long golf course and demands a top level game from whoever's going to contend. And those guys don't have enough of the elements anymore.
Now, speaking of that group, I see Fred Couples. Now, I tell you, was there ever a more beautiful golf swing than Fred Couples? And the physical problems he had, we'd see him with some more titles on his resume if it wasn't for those, wouldn't we?
Well, we sure would. And it would have been a very popular thing if he'd been able to win a lot more majors than just the one Masters. And 92 was the year before I started going to the Masters. So I kind of missed Freddie's era of certainly his win, although it seemed like every year that I went back, Freddie 20 years later was still up there in the first couple of rounds. And you go, Freddie, he just has such a rhythmic, perfect tempo golf swing, and he can still get it out there a long way, not as long as the big hitters of today, but long enough at Augusta that he was able to play long after you would have thought his prime was long gone. He was just one of those dogged guys that would always be hanging around. You go, how is Freddie doing this? And it was an every year occurrence, or an every second year occurrence. Make you shake your head.
Well, staying with that, we keep hearing people always talk about how important the experience is for the veteran guys who've not only won there, but have played there year after year after year. Here's the question for you. Is that experience more important in the first two rounds or the last two rounds?
Well, it's the closer you get to actually contending on Sunday, the more experience matters, because maybe it'll be different without the crowds this year. I think that's a good question, whether the intensity of playing that final round and the quote unquote back nine on Sunday is as excruciating an experience, but under normal conditions, the back nine on Sunday will really separate you from your intestines if you haven't been there before, or if you haven't been in contention in a major very often. So that's where it really pays off. I think lots of guys who have never been on the map before will be on the leaderboard the first 2 days. You see weird leaders all the time after the first round, or even the second round, but it percolates as the tournament goes on, and you start to see the great players rise up on the leaderboards to the point where there are not very many pretenders up there, generally speaking, on Sunday.
Why is it that golf magic seems to be elevated not only at this event, but also the Open Championship? Is it just the tradition and the history that takes it to the next level?
I really think that great courses and great events bring out greatness in great players. So my last Open Championship at Troon in 2016 was that great battle between Henrik Stenson and Phil Mickelson, where they just threw haymakers at each other on every hole of the final round. It's the greatest duel I'd ever seen. I never saw the Nicklaus Tom Watson Turnberry thing in 75, but this was sensational, and I really thought that, and I've thought often that the courses over there and this one, because they play it every year, really bring out something special from these players. And it's a rare Open Championship or Masters that I've covered that didn't have just incredible drama and incredible play from the winner.
Speaking of drama, before you came on, Bryn and I were YouTubing Tiger Woods chip in. Not only the circumstances of that huge bend and the ready-made Nike commercial it provided with the ball sitting on the lip, but the call was fabulous. Now, were you back in the media center banging off a story? Were you in the gallery? Where were you when that moment unfolded?
At that moment, I was probably still in the media center. In fact, I do remember seeing it on my monitor, which they give you a monitor right in front of your seat, at every seat. Nowadays, there's 2 or 3, but in those days, there was a monitor there, and then there's also a big screen. And I'm sure I would have been pounding my copy at that point, and then went out to 18 as they came in, up 18. So if I'm not mistaken, I can't quite remember. I think that's the year he ended up in a playoff with Chris DeMarco. And so I would have been out there at 18 to watch them play that hole, because it's, maybe 100 and 150 meters from the press center up to the 18th green. So Yeah, I'm pretty sure I would have watched that one on TV and been just as awestruck as everybody else sitting at home.
You said up to the 18th. I've talked to so many people who've gone there, and I asked them for their impressions of their first outing there. They always talk about the elevation, how you don't see that on television. It seems like it's flattened out for TV. Did you feel the same way? Like there's a little more hilly action there than you would think.
Oh, there's a lot more hilly action. If you want to walk that course, which I've only done about 100 times, you have to, pack a lunch literally, because it's a hard climb in some places. The walk up 18 is straight uphill all the way to the green from tee to green. It's like you get down to a little low spot just below the tee, and then it's a trek up the hill to the 18th green. And there's a few spots like number 8 that are like that, and some real elevation changes that you didn't see at all before HDTV.
Yeah.
And you can see now somewhat, and depending on the camera angles, you can pick out some relief in the topography, but it really is a surprisingly hilly piece of architecture, and a great walk if you're looking for exercise.
Now, Cam, you've seen that firsthand, watching those guys play it, but to the envy of many, you've also played that course, and you're a hell of a golfer. At least you were last time I saw. Talk about how many times did you actually play it, and talk about walking down the fairways and putting on the greens that you were writing about other people playing on all those years.
Well, I played it 3 times. I played it in '96 after Faldo beat Greg Norman, and then I played it after I think Phil's win in 2004 or so, and then played it again in 2013 or something. It's a deal where you enter the lottery with your press ticket. When you check in, they give you your credentials and a little ticket, like a drink ticket sort of thing, and you drop it in the jar, and it's got your number on it, and you keep the stub, and they write down your number and blah blah blah. And on Sunday morning or Saturday morning, they draw the names of those guys who get to play the course on Monday morning. And if you win, you can't even enter the lottery for the next 7 years.
Wow.
And so by covering 24 of these things, I got to enter it several times, and was lucky enough to get picked 3 times. It's exactly what you kind of think it's going to be, because everybody that watches the Masters pretty much gets a great idea of what the variables on the golf course are. And then when you've walked it a bunch of times, as I had done even before the first time I got to play, I feel as though I know that golf course as well as I know the one that I play every day here in Kelowna. Honestly, there are very few surprises other than the fact that you're not hitting it in some of the places that those guys hit it. But on some holes you are, because when you are a press guy playing this course, they don't play you from the tips. They play you from a variable of the members' tees. So you're playing I don't know what it would be, 66 or 6,700 yards, I don't know, course, as opposed to, 800 or 900 yards more for the men that play the tour. So, yeah, I mean, you hit it in the fairway because there's lots of room to hit it in the fairway. But then as you approach the greens, you realize, darn it, I put it in the wrong part of the fairway here to get any chance to get it on the green in a puttable area. There's little areas of the green that you've got to hit if you want to go to the flag that they have that day. And if you're on the wrong side, if you're short and the pin is long, if you're left and the pin is right, you're going to 3-putt that baby if you're lucky. And it's just a very demanding second shot golf course, I think, far more so than the drive.
Just stay with me for this and I'll bring it back. But in 2005, 3 weeks before the Open Championship, I had a chance to play, thanks to Peter Dawson and the RNA, the old course. And they set me up with a caddy, and his advice for me, as everybody's standing around the white picket fence, is tee the ball up high in a real Scottish brogue. That way it'll look good rather than top the ball and have to chase it down there a little bit. Were you given any assistance, or did you have to pretty much go on your own on that course?
No, you have a caddy. You either pay a caddy, as I did the first 2 times, or and they are club caddies.
Yeah.
Or the third time, they had evolved the press draw to such a point as to haul us into the media center, all the lottery winners, and say, okay, here's how it's going to be tomorrow when you come here. You are going to be a member of Augusta National Golf Course. You don't put your hand in your pocket at any point. You will drive up Magnolia Lane. We will park your car for you. We'll take your clubs out. We'll set you up with a caddy who will take your clubs down to the practice range. You will have breakfast. You will change in the champions locker room. You will have breakfast in the clubhouse, then meet your caddy at the range. You'll practice for as long as you can before your tee time. And then on the first tee, we will announce your name, and off you go. And say you're not allowed to pay your caddy, because we take care of that. So it was like an incredible experience the last time, far more so than the first 2, which were still pretty good. And but none of us in my group anyway could live with the fact that we weren't giving our caddies anything for the effort. So I remember gave my guy $100, I think, and the other guys, I think, gave their caddies whatever they decided. But to me, the idea of playing Augusta National and all it sets you back is $100 is like a
wow,
literally winning the other lottery. So yeah, what a fantastic experience that was, and would be hard pressed to think of any other career I could have had that would have given me some of the opportunities I had that golf gave me. And I understand what you're saying entirely about needing a caddy at the old course as well, because that's another mystery where if you don't know where to hit it, you're going to be in pot bunkers all day, chipping out sideways.
Well, I was told to aim at the TV tower when I realized the fairway's over to the right. and the first thing I learned on the first 2 holes was whatever the caddy tells me, I'm doing it.
Yeah. I remember a caddy at St. Andrews telling me, aim at that. Do you see that brick, stone building over there? And I go, yeah. He said, okay, there's your target. So I'd hit it, an inch to the left of the, by accident, and he'd go, oh, not there.
Yeah.
But there's some great caddy story. I don't know how well you know Alan Watt, the old CBC radio guy, but Alan and Eskimo PR guy. But honestly, Alan has some hilarious stories. There's a Don Whitman story. I don't know how much time we still have here.
Oh, we're good.
Don Whitman goes to St. Andrews, I think during the Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh, back in the 80s, and he's on the first tee box, and his caddy is looking at him, and he says, look, I'm going to have to club you here, so why don't you take a few practice swings, and by the way, what's your handicap? And Whitman says, I'm a 9. And the guy goes, oh, okay, well, take a few swings for me. So Whitman takes a few swings, and the caddy stands back and he goes, you must be a hell of a putter. And if you know St. Andrews, the first tee heads one direction, and just off to your left is the 18th green. Yeah, like right next to you. And so the story goes that a Japanese group appears on the first tee, probably with rented clubs, and there's a brisk headwind blowing into the golfers, and this fella tees it up, hits it straight up in the air off the top of his driver, and the wind carries it off to the left onto the 18th green.
Wow.
And the caddy turns to him and he goes, oh, a wee putting you around in 2.
That's fantastic.
Oh, man.
Wee putt.
caddies over there all have a great sense of humor, and we had some great conversations with them in bars and pubs over there in St. Andrews, which is a lovely little town, as you know.
Yeah.
And when Tiger was an amateur, he had a guy named Bruce Sorley, was a local character who was his caddy, and we saw Bruce the night before the opening round in the Dunvegan pub, just around the corner from the golf course, and he was several sheets to the wind, we thought, and one of our guys, Mark Wicker from the Orange County Register, says to him, Bruce, don't you have to caddy for Tiger tomorrow? And he says, oh, yeah. And he goes, well, what are you doing drinking in here? He says, well, I've just had the one. And so we were going, okay, we'll see. But there he was the next morning. And Tiger likes to play early, and I think he was out early the next morning. And oh, boy, those guys, they all stick together. They've all got great stories to tell, and that would be a book someday of some enterprising journalist to go over there and just interview old course caddies.
Now, Cam, I mean, I think you're probably, you keep pretty low these days, so I don't know if you've got any writing in you, but I'm sure 100 people have said, when are you writing a golf book? Because, and you know, not to grease you here, but I haven't read a lot of better golf writing than what I saw out of the Masters. There's a bunch of really good guys, but you put a touch to it that I always enjoyed. Is there any chance at all ever that you're going to maybe put pen to paper about golf?
I don't know, Robin. I've gotten awfully lazy in here in retirement, playing golf and, sitting around reading and listening to music and, just generally not working. I'm loving the idea of never having a deadline, even if it's a 6 months deadline to come up with a book. I'm just, I'm not highly motivated to do any writing anymore. And people that read me for years are all amazed that I was able to give it up without, major trauma. But believe me, the business, as you well know, Robin, just became less and less and less fun as the years went on. You'd lose colleagues all the time. You'd watch the way the business ate people up and cast them off. And honestly, the newspaper business kind of soured me. And so I think in terms of writing, I kind of got a little burned out too, as more and more and more was asked of us. The fewer and fewer people that were left in the newsrooms. And, so it would take something extraordinary for me. And, I don't think there's many extraordinary book deals anymore for guys like me. I think, they're almost vanity publishing when people do a book now, unless it's about someone with a really famous name that they're writing about. The subject of the book tends to be a vanity project in a way. I might be wrong about that, but that's my impression. And so I think probably, unless it's a collection of columns that I've written where I wouldn't have to, bust my butt too hard to put it together, I think it's kind of unlikely.
It's funny. I just spun around in my chair here and I pulled one book off my bookshelf. And yes, I'm one of these people that still has a bookshelf. And there's a book called Playing Through by Curtis Gillespie, where he took his whole family and they set up camp in St. Andrews for a whole year. It's just a great read. I love going back to it over and over and over again because I find new things in it all the time. But when it comes to reading golf material, do you have a favorite writer, a Canadian favorite writer, or an American, or any kind of writer, somebody who's able to convey the sport of golf the way you like it and would like to remember it?
Well, because he wrote with tongue in cheek and a major smart ass attitude, I love Dan Jenkins.
Yeah.
I always loved reading Dan Jenkins, and his books were the books that I read on golf more so than the serious tomes that were often written by more serious guys. Dan was a serious writer, but he wrote funny. and I love that. And of the serious guys, and it's funny that you had mentioned playing through, because Lauren Rubenstein in Toronto wrote a book called A Season in Dornoch about living in Dornoch, Scotland, one of the great old courses up there, very much north in Scotland. And he's a great golfer. He's written some very fine books and columns, and continues to write some golf stuff. He's been a great golf writer for a long time, and certainly a guy I admire in Canada. And but as you say, I think a lot of general sports columnists in the United States can sit down and write you a darn nice golf column on, just because they're good writers, and it doesn't really matter if golf is their specialty. So you want specialists, I would take Lauren. You want guys that'll just make you laugh and make you understand what really went on in a round of golf, I'd take Dan Jenkins. But lots of great golf writers.
So Cam, before we let you go, I got to ask, best round at the Masters in those 3 times for you, and best score, maybe more precise, and how's the game today?
Well, there was very little difference in the score of the 3 times I played at Augusta. I think I was 83 the first time I played, and then 7 or 8 years later, by which time I'd started to get a little creakier in my swing, I was 84. And the third time I was 84. So those 3 right now, because I'm retired and I'm playing more golf than I ever have in my life, I've managed to bring my handicap down to, well, for a long time this summer, it was a 1. At the moment, it's 2. And I'm playing the best golf of my life at age 67. So I'm a very happy man right now about my golf game.
Let me write that down. Do not play for cash.
It's
okay. There we go.
No, you know what? It's a good thing to play me for cash, because anytime it gets really serious, I can't play to my handicap. So you're going to make a lot of money betting against me.
Okay.
It's not even fair. The guy can write golf. The guy can play golf. There's
Sickening.
those of us who are 0 for 2 on that front.
Hey, listen,
Yeah.
man, this has been great. Great to catch up. We miss reading your stuff,
Yeah.
I got to say. And, you've been highly entertaining on Twitter lately. But you've been highly entertaining on Twitter for a long time as well, since you've joined up there. So I'd like to read more of your stuff. If you ever get that interest in writing a book, I'd be the first one to line up and buy it. And thanks for your time today.
Well, thank you, guys. It's been great chatting with you.
Here it comes.
Oh, my goodness. In your life, have you seen anything like that?
That's almost a little Christmassy. I think based on the fact that in the Edmonton area, we received up to 25 centimeters of snow. And it's funny, you were talking about the Masters heralding the start of spring.
Yes.
And this time around, it's doing the exact opposite. It's winter in full speed, at least in this neck of the woods. Other areas, down in Ontario, they've had temperatures in the 20s. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about, we've lost a couple of guys this past week who've had sports connections. Want to start with Howie first, Howie Meeker?
Wow. I tell you what, anybody, I want to say 45 plus probably really remembers Howie Meeker in his pale blue jacket with his telestrator and the stop it right there. Stop it right there.
Back it up, will you, fellas? Woohoo!
Howie Meeker was such a delightful guy and a passionate guy when it came to hockey that, he's unforgettable to those people who met him. Now, 97 is an awful good run.
Yeah.
That's a life well lived, but it's a reminder again that time passes. But I remember how he was a staple on Hockey Night in Canada, and I went to school out on the island. I have relatives not far from where Howie retired to in Parksville, and terrific guy, loved the game, and the game loved him. So Godspeed, Howie Meeker.
Won the Calder in 1947, four-time Stanley Cup champion with the Toronto Maple Leafs, member of the Order of Canada, and also the Foster Hewitt Award for his TV work. Like in this particular case, he was with John Welch.
Speed. How about that Lindsman and Messier? Each one of them got motors on those skates. Man, can they ever go.
Lots of chances. Messier playing a super hockey game.
Yeah, and Lindsman, too. Lindsman went around the outside of the defenseman twice in a row, and then the third time put it between his legs and had a try. It's really something else.
What about the Flames? What are they doing wrong?
Oh, they got a forecheck. They're giving up the puck too easy. They're dumping it in the Edmonton zone, and then la-di-da-di-da, and Edmonton just bringing it out, gone to the attack. They have to go in there and take the man. Yeah. I thought Calgary would hit somebody to start this hockey club. It's the other way around. Edmonton did
it was going to be a little more physical. We talked about that earlier. Okay, what have you got?
Well, hell, you and I could play out there. It's not that physical. No problem at all.
There you go. There's Howie Meeker. Old-time hockey night in Canada. And, we learned an awful lot. He brought out that telestrator, brought the pen out, was able to break it down for us so we could understand the game at a different level, at a different time. So Howie will be missed. Another guy we lost, and an iconic Canadian who is known on both sides of the border, Alex Trebek, losing him to pancreatic cancer at the age of 80. Now, Al, how much did you watch Jeopardy? It was a staple at our place because it was always on at dinner time. Mm-hmm. You could sit in front of the TV and watch Alex correct people. And I kind of liked that. But he was a huge hockey fan,
yes,
being a Canadian from Sudbury. Also went to the University of Ottawa. Still to this day, was pumping cash into different programs and different facilities at the University of Ottawa right up to the end. And we don't know how much further his philanthropy will go. But one of the things that I loved was because it was a Brainiac show, it didn't like calling it a game show. He'd like to call it a quiz show. But one of the things is he loved to watch people who were really intelligent struggle when it came to talking about sports.
Yes.
Like this particular moment when they were talking about football.
Football 200.
Your choice. Do or don't name this play in which the quarterback runs the ball and can choose to pitch it to another back. It's an option play. Ryan?
Football 400.
I can tell you guys are big football fans.
Yeah.
Tom Landry perfected the shotgun formation with this team. Dallas Cowboys. Do you think we should go to commercial? Ryan?
Take it on to 600.
Okay, by signaling for one of these, a returner can reel in a kick without fear of getting tackled. Fair catch. 2 clues left, Ryan.
800.
These penalties are simultaneous violations by the offense and defense that cancel each other out. And they are called offsetting penalties. Let's look at the $1,000 clue just for the fun of it. Jimmy?
As Minneapolis' U.S. Bank Stadium prepares to host Super Bowl 52, I'm looking at the Ring of Honor with names from this defensive line that took the Vikings to 4 Super Bowls.
If you guys ring in and get this one, I will die. Who are the Purple People Eaters? We're going to take a break. I have to talk to them.
Obviously, that was the last category. Nobody went near that category of that group. But anyway, Alex, we'll miss you. I just don't know how they're going to continue on without him, because when you do something that long, like almost four decades, that's you've become a part of people's fabric in their home. Yeah, it's like I said, 2 tough losses, and we just wanted to salute both of them. Before we go, and before we settle in and watch the Masters this week, anything else you want to talk about? We've touched on a lot of stuff today. That Cam stuff was fantastic.
Yeah, you know what? I haven't, Cam's retired now and living out in Kelowna, happily so. He still plays a lot of golf. I'm looking forward to the Masters, but I got to tell you, I worked with Cam for a number of years at the Journal. Then he went to the National Post, and he's moved around what used to be the old Southern chain.
Yep.
I haven't seen a lot of people who could write golf like Cam Cole could. And it's funny, Bryn, I've got a constant reminder, even though I don't play as much as I once did, and I can't play the game like Cam can. I've still got, when Cam went that first time in 93 and we flew into Florida, he came back, I don't know if he bought a new suitcase or whatever, but he had the swag for everybody back in the sports department.
I bet.
And still on my golf bag to this day, from the 1993 Masters, I've got the green and white Masters towel on my...
Wow.
Yeah, I've kept that ever since then. And it just, it's a nice reminder, but more than that, it was nice talking to Cam again because, like I say, he's one of those guys who could really get the story across and tell you something you didn't already know by looking at the leaderboard. So happy retirement, Cam, but we really appreciated the time today.
And I never had a chance to mention it to him. I don't think I've ever mentioned it to him, but I will. When I was a Cub reporter and I was at the university campus radio station, CJSR, and I remember showing up at an Oilers practice one day because, God bless the Oilers, they would give the campus radio station accreditation back in the day. And I always remember he gave me great advice, and that was stand back. If you have questions, do it after the senior guys ask the questions, when things start to thin out a little bit, and you'll feel more comfortable. Check. Great piece of advice he gave me. And the other one was try to ask a question. Now, sometimes you want that reaction from a player, like an emotional reaction, and a question won't do it. But I always remember Cam saying, try to ask a question and try to do it as quickly as you can. So we can all move on. And I still remember those two pieces of advice he gave this young kid as I was starting out in the mid-'80s. So a big tip of the cap. Thanks to Cam for coming on today. Robin, thanks. This has been a blast. Of course, The Outsiders is brought to you by the Macintosh Group at Remax River City. And one of the things we were talking about earlier, right now, at least at last report, they're looking for a new agent. Just depends on when you download this podcast too, though, right? That's the thing. But anyway, if you're looking for a new gig and you're an agent, give Brent a call at the Macintosh Group at 780-464-0075. You can check them out online at macintoshgroup.ca. And Brent and any of his team members would be more than happy to help you. And right now, they're still getting sold signs put up on homes here in the Edmonton area. So give them a shout. Also, check out his podcast. I'm happy to be part of that one as well. Robin, thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you next week. Enjoy the golf, okay?
See you then.
Was recorded earlier because we were ashamed to do it now.